Hey guys, welcome to this vlog, and on today's video what I want to talk to you about is the reason why I won't be having any cheat meals throughout this prep and how it's going to be beneficial for me, and also my opinion on why cheat meals are not beneficial for fat loss at all. Okay, so firstly, what is a cheat meal? I think we all know what a cheat meal is. We've probably all been there. You stay very restricted with your food selection and your calorie intake for a short period of time, let's say 5 to 6 days. On that 6th or 7th day, you usually have a meal completely untracked, whatever you want, a high calorie meal, high fat, high carb, probably low in protein, and most of the time that'll turn into a full day, okay? So it turns into a binge, and to be perfectly honest, crash dieting or drastic calorie reductions and then having a cheat meal is usually how binge eating or the pattern of binge eating starts. And so many people have a problem with binge eating and an unhealthy relationship with food, which I think is caused by cheat meals, because we see these meals that we call cheat meals as, you know, the food they're actually eating in those meals, we see that as bad and we don't pair that with fat loss. So in our minds, if we're eating those foods, we can't be making progress. And that's why a lot of the time with the cheat meal, it'll turn into a cheat day, because you'll have that shit meal and you might have that for lunch. And then you go, well, I've kind of already stuffed up my diet, so I may as well just finish off the rest of the day eating whatever I want and go back to my diet tomorrow. And then we just repeat that cycle over and over again. And it's easy to see why that happens. And I used to be stuck in the same thing. I used to do exactly the same thing. I would eat really, really clean for a short period of time or even a long period of time, and then feel like I'd earned the right to have a cheat meal or a cheat day where I just went nuts and just ate whatever I wanted, and then felt shit mentally and physically at the end of the day, and then went straight back into my crash dieting or drastic dieting the day after. So I think we've kind of established that they're not beneficial, but I want to explain why. So our bodies don't work off a day-to-day basis when it comes to fat loss, okay? So it's more over the span of, you know, a week, 2 weeks, a month. So let's say, for example, and we all know that to lose weight, we need to be in a calorie deficit, right? We need to be in a negative energy balance, which is usually caused by a calorie deficit. So we need to be taking in less calories than we're burning, or we need to be burning more energy than we're taking in, sorry. And that's usually caused by eating in a calorie deficit. So we have our maintenance calorie intake, which means that if we ate that amount and did the exact same amount of exercise and had the same energy expenditure, that we wouldn't lose weight, we wouldn't gain weight, we would just maintain. So all a calorie deficit is you're eating below your maintenance. So let's say I maintain weight on 3,000 calories per day. For me to be in a deficit, I just need to be below that, okay? So usually I would recommend 300 to 500 calories below, and for the sake of this, let's go with 500 calories. So I'm eating 2,500 a day to lose weight. So let's assume that I've eaten 500 calories below for, let's go 6 days, okay? So I've eaten below for 6 days. Let's go 5. So 1,500 calorie deficit over the span of 5 days, all right? So 500 calories below, that's completely wrong. Sorry, my bad. So we go 300 calories below maintenance for 5 days, which is 1,500, which is what I was trying to say before, okay? So after 5 days, I'm in a 1,500 calorie deficit, meaning that I'm in a fat burning state, I'm losing weight, I'm losing body fat, and I'm on track, you know, everything's going really well. On that 6th day, I decided to have a cheat meal, which will probably turn into a cheat day, even if it's just a meal. And instead of having 2,500 calories for that day, or 2,700, sorry, I have now had, let's say, 4,000 plus calories for the day, because I've just gone nuts on a cheat meal or a cheat day, completely blown out my calories. So what that has actually done, it means that I'm not in a calorie deficit for that week, because my 1,500 calorie deficit that I was in from eating 300 below maintenance for 5 days has just been erased, because I've now blown my calorie intake out. My average for the week has gone up to the point where I'm actually in a calorie surplus. So it wouldn't surprise me if I was actually gaining weight, or at least maintaining, but I'm not going to be losing weight. And that's what happens with a cheat meal. A lot of people think that it's going to increase your leptin levels and kickstart your metabolism and all that stuff, and that's what we're told. And, you know, to an extent that can be true if done properly, or if you're that depleted, that it actually does put you in a state where you're burning more energy, where, you know, your hormones go back to normal. But even still, like, that's not going to happen in 1 day of eating. Okay, so we're thinking of things on a bigger scale here. We can't be thinking about fat loss from a day-to-day basis. It's over a long period of time. So what we can actually do to eliminate this whole problem with cheat meals and blowing out our calorie intake or our average and making no progress, because if you're blowing out your intake to the point where you're at maintenance or above, you're not going to make fat loss progress, and it's just a repeat cycle, and you're going to get frustrated because you're not losing weight. You're going to feel like shit for 5 or 6 days when you're eating very low calories, and then you feel good because you have one day where you can eat a lot, but then you're going to feel shit mentally because you feel like you've let yourself down. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing and what I give to all my clients and what I would highly recommend is a refeed. Now, a refeed is structured and it's calculated, because fat loss is science, okay? Calorie intake, being in a calorie deficit is science. It's proven that it works. So a refeed is structured, it's calculated, it's planned. Now, the easiest form of a refeed, and the way I want to explain it today to help you guys out, and if you have any questions, I'm more than happy for you to comment below, and I'll get back to you. But I also want you guys to go to my website, DannyKennedyFitness.com, and check out one of my best nutrition articles, which is the Ultimate Guide to Flexible Dieting, to get a better understanding of this whole thing. Okay, and I also have a few articles on my page about refeeds, which is worth a look as well. Or you can send me an email at danny@DannyKennedyFitness.com, and I'm more than happy to help you out. But let's use our example again of our calorie deficit for the span of a week. So let's say on average per day, so all a refeed day is increasing your carbohydrate intake, which then increases your overall calorie intake, and carbs can be increased by up to 100%, which is pretty awesome when you think about it, because mentally you're going to feel really good about getting more food on one day of the week, and we can structure refeed so you get refeed every couple of days if you really need to, and if your body fat's low enough. But you're mentally going to feel great. Physically, you're going to train a lot better in the days following your refeed day. You're probably going to sleep a lot better. Your motivation is going to be higher because you actually have a bit of energy, and your overall energy expenditure is going to be slightly better because you'll have more energy to move around and do the things that you probably wouldn't do if you were tired and lethargic from a calorie deficit. So the example I want to use is, let's say on average your carbohydrate intake per day is 250 grams of carbohydrates over the span of 7 days. To get this refeed, all we're going to do is take 25 grams of carbohydrates from 6 of those days. Okay, so let's say Monday through to Saturday, instead of being at 250 grams of carbs, we're going to drop it down to 225. Okay, now by doing that, we're left with a total of 150 carbohydrates that have been taken out over the span of that week. Okay, so hopefully you're following along here, but we've taken 25 grams out from 6 days, which leaves us with a total of 150 carbs we've taken out. Now on the 7th day, our carbohydrates are still at 250, alright, because that's a normal day, but we have 150 that were taken out during the week. All you're going to do is add them to the 250, which now leaves us with 400 carbohydrates on that 7th day. Over the span of the week, we're still in a calorie deficit. Okay, our average carbohydrate intake over 7 days is still 250, except on one day it's bumped right up. Okay, so mentally you're not thinking to yourself, I've stuffed up on my diet, because your intake is still the same. You're still in a calorie deficit. It's calculated. But also mentally and physically, you're going to feel really, really good, because you got one day where you've gone from 225 grams of carbohydrates, now you're up to 400. Which, trust me, when you're dieting, feels really, really good. And especially mentally, knowing that, on those days that you might feel like shit, your energy levels are low, you're lethargic, you know that by the end of the week or that 7th day, you get a day where you can basically, splurge, I guess, on calories, as long as it is still calculated and you're hitting your numbers, and you're still going to see progress. In fact, you're going to see better progress, because you're going to train the house down the days following your refeed. So that's the most simple way to explain a carbohydrate refeed. And you might be thinking, what are you going to do with your protein and fats on those days, on the refeed day? I would just highly recommend keeping them exactly the same. I don't see any need to change them. If you really wanted, you could slightly drop your protein intake, so then your overall calories aren't as high. It's really hard to be increasing carbs by that much and dropping fat at the same time, because it's going to be hard to find foods where you're going to get a lot of carbs with very minimal fat. So guys, that is the most simple way to explain a refeed, but it's also the best way to explain why cheat meals are bullshit. because they're not going to work for you, and over time it's just going to create a bad relationship with food. It's going to cause binge eating, and it's going to give you shitty results, and your fat loss results are going to be crap. So refeeds are the way to go, and like I said, we can structure them 1 day a week. You can structure them 2 days a week. I don't want to go into too much detail, but if you're going to do 2 days a week, you know, you might take 25 grams from 5 days of the week, okay? So instead of 150, you have 125 grams of carbohydrates to play with. You can spread that over 2 days. You know, there's plenty of ways you can do it, which I don't want to go into too much detail because this has probably already been a little bit confusing. But if you need any of this cleared up, please do comment below with what you want to know more about refeeds and why cheat meals don't work, or why I think they don't work, because it's just my opinion, but to me it seems extremely logical when you go through what I explained at the start of the video. So I hope this has helped you guys clear up any confusion around cheat meals and what's going to work best for you in regards to fat loss. I know it's working for me. This is what I'm going to be doing throughout my whole prep, and prep's going really well. It's what I've done throughout all of my preps so far, okay? So from my first comp to now, I've never used cheat meals. I've always used refeed days and high carb days, and it works extremely well. So hope you guys have enjoyed this video. A little bit of a different one today, but I hope it's been informative, and I look forward to chatting to you guys in the next vlog.